All right, so today we're diving into this script about healthy conflict in relationships.
Uh-huh.
How to disagree without totally blowing things up.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's such a great way to put it because I think a lot of people see conflict as inherently negative, so something to avoid at all costs.
Exactly.
But this script flips that whole idea on its head.
Really?
It suggests that conflict is actually this inevitable part of any relationship and that it can actually be a force for good, a way to strengthen your bond.
That's mind-blowing. You're telling me arguing can actually be a good thing for my relationship.
Maybe not arguing in the traditional sense, but disagreements, definitely.
Yeah.
The key is learning to distinguish between healthy conflict,
Uh-huh.
which can actually bring you closer, and those toxic blowouts that leave everyone feeling raw.
Okay. I'm intrigued. So tell me, what's the difference between a relationship-boosting spat and one that sends me running for the hills?
The script highlights the work of Dr. John Gottman.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of him.
He's like this big name in relationship research.
A total guru.
And he has this really vivid metaphor that he uses. He talks about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
4 horsemen, like end of the world stuff.
Exactly. He uses these horsemen to represent criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling.
Okay.
These are like the communication patterns that he's observed to be the most damaging to relationships.
Wow, okay, the 4 horsemen. I'm definitely getting some ominous vibes here.
Yeah, the imagery is pretty intense, right? But it really drives home the point that these patterns can erode the foundation of a relationship over time.
So those are the toxic ones. What does healthy conflict look like?
Healthy conflict is like the antidote to those horsemen. It's about approaching disagreements with this spirit of collaboration,
Okay.
not combat. It's about really listening to understand your partner's perspective, not just like waiting for your turn to talk.
Yeah, I've definitely been in those arguments where it feels like we're just talking past each other.
Totally. And the script talks about how these toxic fights actually trigger a physiological fight or flight response.
Oh, wow.
Like our bodies get flooded with stress hormones, and it becomes almost impossible to think clearly or communicate effectively.
So we're basically just reacting from a place of fear and anger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's when things can really spiral out of control.
So when you see those red flags, it's probably a good idea to hit the pause button before you say something you'll regret.
100%.
Yeah.
Taking a break can be so helpful in those heated moments.
But how do you know when things are heading into that danger zone? What are some of the signs that an argument is turning toxic?
The script actually outlines some pretty clear warning signs. Things like raised voices,
Okay.
constant interruptions,
Oh,
sarcasm dripping from every word,
yeah, I know that tone.
and that whole shutting down emotionally thing, like when one person just completely checks out of the conversation.
Oh, I've been there. It's like the air gets sucked out of the room.
It's all communication just comes to a screeching halt.
Exactly. So recognizing those signs is important.
Yeah.
But then what? Like, how do you actually shift gears from a toxic fight to a healthy dialogue?
That's where the script gets really practical.
Yeah.
It breaks down 6 specific strategies for resolving conflicts in a way that can actually strengthen your relationship.
6 strategies. Okay, I'm all ears.
And the first one is surprisingly simple. It's all about taking a pause.
Seriously, just stop talking.
Yep. Literally stopping and taking a deep breath before things escalate any further.
That's it. Just breathe.
I know it sounds almost too easy, right?
It just does.
But the script really emphasizes how crucial this is. Remember that fight or flight response we were talking about?
Yeah.
Taking a moment to breathe helps to calm your nervous system and shift you out of that reactive mode so you can approach the situation with a clearer head.
Okay, I can see how hitting the pause button could prevent things from going totally off the rails.
Yeah.
But once you've taken a breath and calmed down a bit, what's next?
That's where active listening comes in.
Active listening. So not just like pretending to listen while you're actually thinking about what you're going to say next.
Exactly. It's about genuinely trying to understand your partner's perspective, even if you don't agree with it.
So you're not just hearing the words, but you're actually trying to absorb what they're saying and reflect back their feelings to make sure you're both on the same page.
Precisely. The script even suggests using what's called reflective listening. It's like saying, okay, what I'm hearing is you feel hurt and frustrated because,
Right.
and then summarizing their point of view in your own words.
Oh, that's interesting. So it shows them that you're not just waiting for your turn to talk,
Right.
but that you're actually making an effort to understand where they're coming from.
Exactly. And that can make a huge difference in how the conversation unfolds.
Okay, so pause, breathe, listen actively. Got it. What else do we need to keep in mind?
Strategy number 3 is about keeping the conversation focused on the issue at hand.
Okay.
not on attacking each other's character.
So less, you always do this, and more, I'm feeling frustrated because...
Exactly. The script points out how personal attacks just trigger defensiveness,
Yeah.
which only makes the situation worse. Instead, try using I statements to express your feelings without blaming your partner.
So instead of saying, you never listen to me, you could say, I feel unheard when I don't get a response.
Exactly. It's a subtle shift,
Uh-huh.
but it can make a big difference in how your partner receives the message.
It's like you're owning your feelings without making them feel like they're under attack. I like that. Okay, so far we've got pausing, active listening, and focusing on the issue. What's next on the list?
This one is a biggie: practicing empathy.
Empathy.
Remember how we talked about how toxic fights trigger that fight or flight response?
Yeah.
Empathy is like the kryptonite to that.
So putting myself in my partner's shoes, even if I don't agree with them?
You got it. It's about recognizing that their feelings are valid,
Okay.
even if you disagree with their perspective. It's about remembering that you're on the same team, even in the midst of a disagreement.
I'm liking this whole approach. It's like we're building a bridge of understanding instead of digging trenches. What are the last two strategies?
Number 5 is about setting healthy boundaries.
Boundaries? What kind of boundaries?
It's like drawing a line in the sand about what's acceptable and what's not during a disagreement.
So like agreeing not to interrupt each other or bring up past issues that have already been resolved.
Exactly. It's about creating a safe space where you can both feel comfortable expressing yourselves without fear of being attacked or belittled.
I can see how that would be important. And the last one.
Number 6 is all about ending on a positive note.
Even if you hasn't completely solved the problem.
Yes, even then. The script highlights the importance of preserving the emotional connection even if you haven't reached a full resolution.
Okay.
So you could say something like, thank you for sharing your feelings with me, or I appreciate you trying to understand my perspective.
So even if we're not totally on the same page yet, we can still acknowledge each other's efforts and end the conversation with a sense of goodwill.
Exactly. It's about leaving the door open for further discussion and ensuring that the conflict doesn't damage the foundation of the relationship.
This has been really helpful. But there's one thing I'm still grappling with.
What's that?
That feeling of needing to be right. Like having to win the argument, even if it means sacrificing the relationship. How do you let go of that?
Oh, the need to be right.
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
And it's actually the focus of the next part of this script. It even brings in another expert voice.
Oh.
Dr. Brené Brown.
Ooh, I love Brené Brown. She always has such great insight.
She does. And she has this one quote about choosing between being right and being in a relationship that I think will really resonate with you.
Okay, lay it on me. What does she say?
She says, you can either be right or you could be in a relationship.
Whoa. Okay, that's a powerful statement. I'm going to need a minute to process that one. I think that's a good place to pause for now. We'll delve into that thought-provoking quote and explore the art of letting go of the need to be right when we come back.
Sounds good. All right, so we left off with that Brené Brown quote. You can either be right or you can be in a relationship. And it really got me thinking about all those times I've dug in my heels during an argument, even when I knew it was probably pushing my partner away.
It's so easy to get caught up in that need to be right, isn't it?
It is. It's like this primal instinct or something. Yeah. But how do you actually let go of that?
The script offers a few practical suggestions, and they actually tie back to some of the strategies we talked about earlier.
Like what?
Active listening and empathy.
Oh, because if you're really trying to understand your partner's perspective, it's harder to cling to your own need to be right.
Exactly. It's like you're shifting your focus from winning the argument to understanding each other.
And that's what healthy conflict is all about, right? Exactly. It's not about who's right or wrong. It's about finding a solution that works for both people.
Okay, so active listening and empathy. Those are key.
Yeah.
But what about those times when you just feel so passionately about something? You're right.
The script reminds us that being right isn't always the most important thing. Sometimes choosing kindness and understanding is more valuable than winning an argument, even if you're convinced you have the facts on your side.
That's a tough one. But I see your point. Sometimes it's better to just let it go for the sake of the relationship.
And it's not about saying you're wrong or that your feelings don't matter. It's just about acknowledging that there are different ways of seeing things and that your partner's perspective is just as valid as yours.
Okay, so active listening, empathy, and choosing kindness over being right, I'm getting it. But what about those really tough conversations? The ones that involve deeply held values or beliefs?
Those can be tricky, but they're also incredibly important.
They are. How do you navigate those without things getting too messy?
The script suggests that vulnerability is key.
Vulnerability. So, like being open and honest about our feelings.
Exactly. Even when it feels scary. It's about creating a safe space where you can both let your guards down and be your authentic selves.
Even if you don't see eye to eye on everything.
Even then.
Yeah,
Because sometimes just being heard and understood can make all the difference.
that's true. It's like
Yeah.
you're saying, I see you, I hear you, and I respect you, even if I don't agree with you.
Exactly. And that can go a long way in preserving the relationship.
So even if those differences seem irreconcilable, you can still find a way to coexist respectfully.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that our differences don't have to be deal breakers. They can actually enrich the relationship, adding depth and complexity.
Wow, this has been a real eye-opener. It's like we've gone from viewing conflict as this big, scary monster to seeing it as an opportunity for growth and connection.
It's a powerful shift in perspective, isn't it? And it all starts with understanding the difference between healthy and toxic conflict and then putting those practical strategies into action.
So the next time I find myself facing a disagreement, I should remember to pause, breathe, listen, actively practice empathy, set healthy boundaries, end on a positive note, and embrace vulnerability.
Exactly. And most importantly, remember that choosing the relationship over the need to be right can open the door to a deeper level of connection and love.
This has been so insightful. It's like you've given me a whole new toolbox for dealing with conflict in a healthy way.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And remember, conflict is inevitable, but it doesn't have to be destructive. With the right approach, it can actually be a catalyst for growth, understanding, and lasting love.
So we've talked about all these strategies for healthy conflict. Sometimes it's still hard to let go of that need to be right.
It is. It's definitely a challenge.
Like when you're in the heat of the moment and you just feel so convinced that your perspective is the right one.
I get it. It's easy to get caught up in those emotions.
Yeah. But how do you actually shift your mindset? How do you choose the relationship over being right? Especially when it feels so important to you in that moment.
The script emphasizes the importance of reminding yourself that your goal in these conversations isn't to win, it's to connect.
To understand each other better.
Exactly. And sometimes that means letting go of the need to have the last word or to prove your point.
It's like choosing to build a bridge instead of a wall.
That's a great way to put it. And the script actually suggests a few specific things you can do to help you make that choice.
Like what?
First, it's helpful to really tune into your body and notice how you're feeling physically when you're starting to get caught up in that need to be right.
Noticing that your heart is racing or your fists are clenched.
Exactly. Those are signs that your fight or flight response is kicking in and it's time to take a step back.
Like we talked about before, pausing and breathing can really help to calm those physiological responses.
Exactly. It gives you a chance to reset and come back to the conversation from a more grounded place.
Okay, so pay attention to your body and take a pause when needed. But what about those times when you're just like so sure you're right? How do you let go of that certainty?
The script suggests that it can be helpful to remind yourself that even if you're right about the facts, you're not necessarily right about everything.
What do you mean?
There's always more than one way to see a situation, and your partner's perspective, even if it's different from yours, is still valid.
So it's like acknowledging that there's no one right answer.
Exactly. And that's where curiosity can come in.
Curiosity.
Instead of trying to convince your partner that you're right,
Right.
try getting curious about their perspective. Ask them questions. Really listen to their answers.
So it's about turning the argument into a conversation.
Exactly. And that can make a huge difference in how you both feel.
Okay, so pay attention to your body, take a pause, remember that there's more than one way to see things, and get curious about your partner's perspective.
Got it.
But what about those times when it feels like you're just hitting a wall? Like you've tried all of these things and you're still not making any progress.
Yeah, those can be tough situations. And sometimes it's helpful to call a timeout and agree to revisit the conversation later when you've both had a chance to cool down.
Because sometimes you just need a little space to process your own thoughts and feelings.
Exactly. And coming back to the conversation with fresh eyes
Yeah.
can often help you see things in a new light.
This has been so helpful. I feel like I'm actually starting to understand how to have healthy disagreements with my partner.
I'm so glad to hear that. And remember, it's a process. It takes practice and patience, but the rewards are so worth it.
They are, because ultimately it's about building a stronger, more loving relationship.
Exactly. And that's something we can all strive for. So as we wrap up this deep dive into healthy conflict, I just want to leave you with one final thought. Conflict is a natural part of any relationship, but it doesn't have to be destructive. By learning to communicate effectively listen with empathy and choose connection over being right, we can turn those disagreements into opportunities for growth, understanding, and deeper intimacy. And that's a beautiful thing.